Yeah, I'm John Ciganek from Vanadium Resources, Managing Director and CEO. Our main project is the Steelport Vanadium project in South Africa. We completed a DFS in October last year. It is an advanced project. It's one of the largest deposits in the world, both in tonnes and grade. Our DFS for our first 25 years of our deposit, it's about 180-year mine life. It's about $0.9 billion NPV US. That's for our 74% share of the project. The project's simple. It's relatively flat, gently dipping at about 10 degrees, and very low strip ratio of about 0.9 to 1 waste to ore. And as a result, we're very low operating costs, and we'll be in the lowest quartile, which will be material for our debt financing process. Technically, it's simple. It's an established processing methods. We're concentrating and salt roast leach operations, which is proven technology, proven processes which are used in the bushfield where we're located. Bushfield Minerals, Glencore's Rovan operation. It's an established technique, and we have a general manager of operations who's been running vanadium operations like this for best of 20 years. We've got our mining rights, so we're ready to go in terms of the construction at the end of the year. We're in the bushfield, so that's material. I'm an ex-banker, so for me that gives me a lot of comfort from a technical point of view that we're basically surrounded by circa 30 to 35 mining, refining and smelting operations. So it's not in the middle of the desert. You don't have to develop a power facility or drill for water. We've got water power at our doorstep. We've got access to engineers, engineering firms. We've got access to people who have built and operating these things for these types of operations for generations. We've got an experienced team that have developed and operated projects like this in the past. Our market cap is extremely low. I think we're substantially undervalued, and part of my job at the moment is to rectify that. We're establishing the foundations. We're well advanced on project financing with a series of debt financiers. We're in discussions with a series of off-takers. So we're putting the building blocks in place. So from my perspective, I don't think that we'll be at these types of levels, going forward, particularly as we start announcing some of the news flow related to the financing and offtake in particular. Vessel's the chairman. He's been involved with this asset since about 2007. And very good relationships with the communities. They treat him as an elder. I've met the communities. So in terms of operating the bushfield, that's a key factor for getting this developed. In terms of getting it banked and financed, we're really going to be focusing off the steel and alloy market, not the vanadium redox flow battery at this stage. It's really around establishing a long-term offtake that can be banked. So banks are low risk. So the idea is to get a major steel producer with a long-term offtake. And it's really around the steel and alloy market. It's around strengthening and lightening steel. For example, the A350 Boeing jet has about 100 tons of lightweight vanadium alloy in it. That's just an example of the benefit of having vanadium in steel. From a development perspective and getting this funding, it'll be focusing mainly on the steel and alloy market. And our stage one will be developed off that. Stage two is another thing altogether. So if there is a wave coming together, coming down the pipeline in terms of vanadium redox flow battery, we'll be up and running, developing vanadium pentoxide, which we can easily switch over into vanadium redox flow battery. There are facilities globally. There's quite a few large now. A Dalian facility in China. That's a 100 megawatt facility which was built in October last year. They're expanding that now to double the capacity. From my perspective, getting this banked, I think we probably need about another 18 months to see more examples of that before it could be banked. But from our perspective, by the time we build this project and we move into phase 2 expansion, we'll have lots of examples of that. So we can make a decision to make a move from the steel and alloy into vanadium redox flow battery. This is just highlights the current market around the demand for vanadium pentoxide. It's primarily steel and alloy. You can see the blue diagram in the middle. It's about 90% of the market. Vanadium redox flow battery represents about 6 to 7%. Aerospace is a portion of that as well. It's an important area. It will be able to produce and meet that requirement as well. But the key area in terms of the projections going forward in terms of the market on VRFB is material going forward. Some of the metrics I mentioned earlier were 0.9 billion for our 74%, but that's the first 25 years of our deposit. We are working in the next 6 to 12 months around identifying what other value accretive aspects we can do with the remainder of deposits. For example, we're in discussions with potential joint venture partners around potentially quarantining other portions of our deposit as separate DFSs, for example. The free cash flow is about $152 million US per annum once in production. Good IRR at 42%, 27-month payback period. The CapEx is low. We're focusing basically on vanadium pentoxide, so we've made this as simple as possible, as low CapEx as possible. A lot of other companies like Bushfield Minerals, Glencore and Largo in Brazil produce a range of products: vanadium trioxide, ferrovanadium, titanium dioxide, ilmenite. We can produce that, but my mission is to just get this built first, just off vanadium pentoxide, and then hopefully, if the market rewards us for that, then we'll be able to expand and look at more of the value accretive products as well. $3.24 operating costs were in the lowest quartile. So from my perspective, and already in discussions with banks, that definitely facilitates getting a debt financing done. At the moment, the DFS was done at $9.50 a pound for vanadium pentoxide. Currently, it's trading about $10.50 to $11. For me, this is a key. We're in South Africa, and there are some of the negative sentiment around South Africa is about power, about generally operating in South Africa. From my perspective, Bushfield is almost like a zone within South Africa that has been here for decades and will be here for decades going forward. For example, on the power side, in South Africa, there are issues with respect to outages in terms of power. So there's circa 30 to 35 mining, smelting, refining operations. So the government and Eskom are not going to switch these off. So that's a partial mitigant for the lenders. But we've got access to water, power, infrastructure, engineers, and I've been interviewing people who are within the area that can speak the local dialect, professional engineers who've been working in some of the major mining companies for the last 20, 30 years. So the number of people that we'll be able to get will be a very high caliber relative to trying to find people like this in the middle of Australia, for example. In terms of specifics, the mine site is on the right-hand side. The red box is basically our 25 years and our DFS. The blue boundary outside represents our 180-year mine life. So the point that I made earlier around having discussions with joint venture partners potentially could be within our DFS, but also outside of that, with respect to battery manufacturing, potentially doing JVs with energy generators, particularly in South Africa. So we'll be mining and producing a concentrate on our mine site, and then we'll be hauling it across over to our Steelport salt roast leach operation. Currently in the DFS, we're planning to do this as road haulage, but at the moment we're looking at doing a overland conveyor. Basically, it's a ski lift with a hopper, with a lid, and that'll be electrified as well. And we're in discussions with our mining contractor around electrifying the fleet. So, one of our objectives here is to ultimately move this towards a predominantly electrified site. The DFS has assumed a small solar facility and a VRFB on our mine site, not necessarily large enough to cover the entire capacity of that facility, but it's enough to cover any sort of outages in terms of issues with Eskom. And for me, it's more like a demonstration plant. Once I can convince myself and the board that it is commercial, we could potentially create a microgrid for that site. On the second site, we're basically in a gated industrial complex, and the party that owns that group, they're building a 35 megawatt solar facility, and we're in discussions with them about potentially doing a direct tariff with them, potentially wheeling it through Eskom, or alternatively just doing a straight 50-50 JV with them, where part of our financing process will encapsulate that. But from my perspective, that's also another mitigant in terms of any issues around power. I won't go into too much detail, but the deposit's big, 680 million tonnes. It's relatively flat. You can see here the scale. You can see on the diagram doesn't highlight how big this is, and we're just really using 12% of the resource for the DFS. We've done some of our benchmarking in terms of operating costs. Our operating costs are generally comparable to what we're seeing in the bushfield area. The Australian operations have got higher operating costs, higher capex, because they're in the middle of the desert. And it is more costly to produce and build projects in Australia relative to the bushfield. I won't go into too much detail, but on the right-hand side is our concentrator, and the left-hand side is the salt roast leach plant, which is effectively a replica type of facility that Bushfield Minerals and Rovan and Largo in Brazil are using at the moment. For me, I've been an advisor advising mining companies like this for about 17 years. I'm an ex-banks engineer. This is the key for this project. We're well advanced on project financing. We've got a debt advisor in London. We're running a process. We've already got several term sheets. We're well advanced on that. We're well advanced on discussions with off-takers. We're getting strong interest in terms of offtake, but also strong interest to participate equity into the company and then following their investment into construction, hopefully. But the objective is to have them there with skin in the game, which is a key ingredient for debt financing. In terms of timeline, this is a timeline that has been in place as part of the DFS. It is a stretch target technically. So one of the things that we've done with the general manager that we've operated, we've just started last month. His first task is to revisit our technical schedule to get to construction point, point of construction, final investment decision point. We'll have debt financing. We'll have offtake by the time we get to that. The question is whether we do debt financing that we can do quickly, which will cost more, versus more conventional project financing, which will cost less, but it'll be more technical due diligence, but will take us longer. So if we can get there by the end of the year, we'll have a funding package to suit. And in terms of wrapping up, first phase is really building our phase one, which is 13,000 tonnes of vanadium pentoxide per annum. Second stage is doubling capacity in year 4 and 5. In terms of the resource on the right-hand side, we're doing a lot of work. We're starting a lot of work in terms of optimizing and extracting as much value we can from the optimizer and the resource itself. We're implementing a rope conveyor, which will help with the economics. Then, do we just keep getting bigger and just focusing on vanadium pentoxide, or do we create a facility that can produce the suite of products for vanadium? And the last point here is we are having discussions with off-takers, but also potential joint venture partners around building battery, 50-50 joint ventures with that, but also power generation, particularly in South Africa. It's topical with respect to power. And that's basically it. I'm pretty excited to be involved in the project. I'll hand over to questions.